free in the least. You need a diploma in this country to cut hair. You're free. You need to keep your tray in an upright and locked position during takeoff. It's not just a hack premise. It's a fucking felony. And Cunty the hero sky club will fucking throw you off the plane as a terrorist for going, why do I have to have this? This doesn't make sense. They say if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, then he's got to get a fishing license, but he doesn't have any money. So he's going to get a job, and he has to get into the Social Security system and pay taxes. And now you're going to audit the poor cocksucker because he's not really good with math. You pull the IRS van up to your house, he'll take all your shit. He'll take your Black Velvet Elvis and your Batman toothbrush and your penis pump, and that all goes up for auction with the burden of proof on you because you forgot to carry the one because you were just worried about eating a fucking fish, and you couldn't even cook the fish because you needed a permit for an open flame. And then the health department is going to start asking you a lot of questions about where are you going to dump the scales and the guts. This is not a sanitary environment. And ladies and gentlemen, if you get sick of it all at the end of the day, not even legal to kill yourself in this country. Thanks again, John Ashcroft, you weird Bible addict, can't even handle his own drug. You were born free, you got fucked out of half of it, and you wave a flag celebrating.
Heck of a way to start off a live stream with some Doug Stanhope. Let me start the recording, and then we shall resume the Freedom and Liberty Talk.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we are back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much for joining us. As you can see, my normal co-host, Brandon, is not in the live stream tonight, if you hadn't noticed. I believe that his fiance's water broke, so he should be welcoming his new child into the world sometime today. I haven't heard anything from him. Let's just, put out some good thoughts and prayers for Brandon that they deliver a nice, healthy baby. But instead, I have a special treat. My co-host tonight was kind enough, and I think I contacted him like 1:30, 2 o'clock, and said, hey, man, my co-host can't make it. Can you do a show with me tonight? And he said, absolutely. And it is Tom Martz, one of our favorite returning guests, or at least one of my favorite. I know a lot of the audience likes him as well because, Tom just speaks the truth unfiltered, and you know exactly where you stand with him. And Tom has honestly he's had a big influence on my way of thinking. I say this a lot, but when I first met Tom, I thought, boy, he's kind of being a little nitpicky on things. But when I took a step back and I looked at it from Tom's point of view, thinking about how we got to where we are now, how many people try to govern as close to the Constitution as they can, and that's why we're in the situation we're in now, because they don't. And I thought, well, Tom's not being nitpicky. Tom's right on. So anyway, Tom, good evening to you, sir, and thanks again for taking time out to join me tonight.
Hey, not a problem, man. The application of why it is that I'm so stringent comes from basically Thomas Jefferson. If you go back and read the writings of Thomas Jefferson back before the Declaration and before the Constitution, he was always questioning, where do you get that authority? Where do you think you get the authority simply because you're in some sort of governmental capacity to control my life? So I've been co-opted by TJ.
Hey, that's not a bad person to be co-opted by at all. I mean, before we even start, because Tom, I'm so bad about doing this. Why don't you tell everybody about every Friday you have a show on KSGF. Go ahead and plug that at the beginning, because I'm so bad at the end about remembering to allow you time to plug your hour show that you do and all that other stuff. So, and let everybody know where they can find the audio clips and all that happy noise.
Well, actually, I got some good news on that front because KSGF 104.1 FM, 1260 AM, Springfield Talk Radio, has created on their website, they've created a new link called Elections. And what Sarah, the producer for the Nick Reed Show, is doing is like my show, which is every first, second, third, and possibly fourth Friday of the month, depending on how many Fridays are in the month. If I do anything talking about the amendments, talking about the political realm on something that's coming up on the ballot, they have created a new link on ksgf.com where you can go in, you can look down the toolbar, click on elections, and you'll find where it is that I've talked about the amendments, where it is that I've talked about local tax proposals, where it is on occasion that I've talked about candidates, although I try to avoid the candidate application because people say I'm too rough on the Republicans. But the fact of the matter is the Republicans control the state, so there's no reason to be detrimental to the Democrats because they don't have the power to do anything. So that makes it easy for people to find the different avenues of where it is that I've talked about the ballot issues or anything that deals with local politics or statewide politics. So that includes like if Nick interviews, let's say, John Ashcroft or Bill Eigel or Casper the Friendly Ghost, that would be Mike Keogh since he doesn't show up for anything. If he interviews those people, you'll find it in that election section as well. But yeah, from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., I've got what we consider the Locke and Smith Foundation hour on KSGF. If Nick goes on vacation, I'm fortunate enough generally to get the Friday that he's on vacation. I usually get the 3-hour. I get the whole entire show, so I get to do pretty much anything I want. And what I try to do is I try to get things that people aren't accustomed to hearing. Like one of the things that I want to do is I want to get somebody on the show, whether it's 2 hours, 3 hours, from the Innocence Project to talk about people who have been wrongfully convicted. They've spent half their life in prison, and I want to be able to interview them, their thought process on how it is that they can be so jovial when they get out and not deciding that they're going to hunt down everybody who convicted them. I find that absolutely amazing. But I try to use my 3-hour segment as a mechanism to educate people on things that they don't normally hear.
Well, and I mean, let's be honest, we need more shows like that because, even some of these talk radio stations, they like to consider themselves like patriot radio stations, but I mean, it's just, they'll get all the big Republican names on there and they just allow them to flat out lie to people or mislead them. And you don't see hosts really, for the most part, you don't see the host calling them out. They just let them come on and it's like, okay, people, you supposedly have this station so that you are supposedly wanting to spread the message of liberty, and yet these people come on and you just let them just tell bold-faced lies, and you're just like, oh okay, there it is. I hate the fact that these supposedly patriot radio stations still feel they have to suck up to certain political parties. It's like if they don't, they're going to lose their license. I don't understand it, Tom. It drives me absolutely insane because, you expect it from the Sean Hannitys and the Mark Levins because they're just blowhards that fool a lot of people into thinking they're great Americans or, Mark Levin is supposedly some constitutional expert. Now, I know I'm not, but I don't pretend that I am either. And, people like Robert Brown and the 10th Amendment Center just drive Mark Levin absolutely nuts because they're always calling him out on his stupidity. But, yeah, I just hate the fact that these supposed patriot stations just feel like they have to pucker up to every Republican that comes around, and they just can't call them out on their hypocrisy. Like if they did, they're just going to be shut down the next day, and I just don't see that happening.
Man, I can't even tell you how many years I've been following the 10th Amendment Center and Michael Bolton. He's an individual. He doesn't have all the fancy letters after his name that I'm aware of, because I've never actually researched him. But I have actually researched some of the things that he has been discussing on his show. So, I kind of fell into the Rush Limbaugh trap back in the 80s. And then I decided to start researching some of the things that he was talking about, and I found this wide array of an area that he wasn't covering. And that was when my light came on and said, oh, wait a minute. He's promoting an agenda based on his ideology and what he believes. But he's not willing to question the side that he believes in for the things that they do. He only wants to question the other side. And there's enough truth on both sides of the aisle that I think people should make themselves available to that.
And that's the thing, Tom. I realize that shows like mine, because I just, if they do something dumb, I call it. The shows like mine will never be syndicated, because it's not, to them, it's not a financially sound decision to bring people on, because you'll have one show where somebody's going to suck up to a particular political party, and then I'll come in before or after and, drag their name through the mud because I don't agree with the way they decide to vote on legislation or their campaign promises or whatever. So this show is never going to become that popular just because and I don't necessarily know that I'd want to do radio, because I like these long format interviews. And I know generally if you're doing, mainstream radio, you're getting like 2 minutes with somebody, 5 minutes tops, and kind of hard to get all the good information out when you're just constantly going to commercial breaks and everything like that. And I have enough problems keeping track of my thoughts in 2 hours. But if I had to keep trying to remember the last subject I was on before a radio break, I'd go through notebooks of paper just writing my where I left off at before some kind of advertising break. But anyway, enough about that. So I don't know, Tom. I feel like first things first, I want to talk about this court opinion, this sorry excuse for a court opinion on Missouri's SAPA legislation, where, they found it saying this without my blood pressure spiking is difficult. When justices say that a law that says Missouri law enforcement will not enforce unconstitutional federal gun laws is struck down, supposedly, the opinion is that violates the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution. So that means these justices are twisting the ideal and the intent behind the Supremacy Clause, which even one of the authors of the legislation, when I had a 10-15 minute interview with him, and someone in the live chat said, does this mean we get to have full autos? And he's like, well, no, because of the Supremacy Clause. So even he got it wrong. But these court opinions, especially something like this, drives me absolutely bonkers. And Tom, again, I am no constitutional scholar, clearly not an expert, but I do have enough of an understanding on the Supremacy Clause to know that they are absolutely, without a doubt, completely wrong on this. And even one of the authors of the bill, one of the sponsors, was completely wrong on the topic. But at least I can agree with this legislation that tries to get us our natural rights of self-defense back. Just give me your thoughts on this, because I know you've got a lot more to say on this than I do, because you're probably a little more well-versed on this. But what was the first thing that came to your mind when you heard this court opinion that it violates the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution?
Well, the first thing I did is I waited until I could find the opinion online. And then I went and read it myself. And I absolutely found it quite interesting that even when they quoted, and this is the 3-judge panel, even when they quoted the Supremacy Clause, they didn't quote it accurately. And I think that's done intentionally. If that 3-judge panel were to ever look at any of the letters that were written by Jefferson or Madison or even Hamilton, and you go back to the time frame before the Declaration was written, or go back to the time frame before the Constitution was written, they would clearly see that they're so far out of whack with the actual implied meaning to the written words in the Constitution. It's not even funny, because all SAPA did, in all sincerity, was that it was telling the state agencies that we are going to practice what is called anti-commandeering doctrine. The federal government cannot use the state agencies or the local agencies to enforce federal regulations. It's a well-known application called nullification. It's been used since before the Declaration was written. It was used before the Constitution was written. The states used it, and the even back in that time frame, even the framers of the Constitution were specifically stating that the states were sovereign. They are the determiners of whether or not they're going to abide by certain laws that are passed by the federal government. Of course, the federal government, if you listen to Madison, was supposed to be small and contained within a certain realm, but the Anti-Federalists clearly pointed out that that would not occur. So it's up to our state legislators, and it's up to our state, and it's up to the people of the state to say, no, we're not going to comply. So SAPA, in reality, was the state saying, you can have all the federal rules and regulations that you want. You're not going to use any of the state services to enforce those rules and regulations that you have. If you want to enforce them, you're going to have to do that on your own. You cannot contact anyone within the state of Missouri to do it for you. And the fact that this 3-judge panel decided to inadequately quote the Supremacy Clause by leaving the section out which states, in pursuance thereof, says everything that you need to know about this judicial opinion. That's why I decided, after 2 years of law school, and God knows how much money I spent, that I just couldn't go any further. The papers that I was turning in were deemed inappropriate homework assignments because I was using the Jeffersons. I was using the people that Michael Bolton talks about all the time, the letters from the founders. I was using those manners in which it was that the Constitution was defined, and I'm being told that no. You have to go by the former precedent that was set by the judicial branch. Those people aren't perfect. It's up to us to determine whether or not a specifically piece of legislation is constitutional or not. And if it's not, it's null and void, as Madison v. Marbury specifically states in that opinion.
Yeah, I did not read the opinion. It was just, again, it's, if you read it and you have any understanding of what the founders envisioned, that Supremacy Clause, again, in pursuance thereof, in pursuance of the Constitution. So I was explaining this to somebody earlier. I think I was talking to my mom about it. And I said, if a state writes a law that would, which they do constantly, I mean, how many states have have written legislation or passed legislation that infringes on someone's natural rights of self-defense, the Second Amendment. But I said then the federal, a federal court could say, hey, that is over. You are actually violating the Supremacy Clause because the Constitution is the law, or supposed to be the law of the land. This is the foremost important document, and these rights are to be protected. But instead, they're doing the opposite, and they're taking out a state's chance. This isn't, like you said, this isn't even so much nullification, but it does put the responsibility on whatever, the ATF, the BATFE, the FBI, whoever. It does put the responsibility on them to enforce these regulations and laws that they've passed or put forth, or these stupid bans on whatever gun parts, bump fire stocks for a while now. Those are back. Things like that. Yeah, okay, you want to enforce them? Go ahead, be our guest, but we're not going to help you. Now, I want your opinion on this too, Tom, because I'm sure you saw and heard some of the things that some of these sheriffs and city police chiefs and everything, they were boo-hooing about when SAPA was passed. And I found that rather amusing because I thought, well, we have sheriffs and police officers that don't understand the Constitution either. So now we can see why all these other things happen in all these cities and towns across Missouri. But what were your thoughts when you heard these, again, city chiefs of police or sheriffs crying over the fact, they said SAPA was not thought out well? And I think they were butthurt because they like working with the feds, probably because they like that federal money or some kind of kickback they get. But what were your thoughts on these law enforcement officials who were crying in their beer over SAPA?
Well, one of the things that we have to understand is every single one of those people swore an oath. The problem is most people do not understand what an oath is, and I think it's November the 5th. I'm actually going to be over in Cape Girardeau at the Guardians of Liberty Cape group over there, where I'm going to do a presentation on what is an oath. Now, granted, I put my right hand up in the air and I put my left hand on the Bible, and I swore an oath back in 1980 when I joined the military, not having a clue what that oath meant. And I think that's intentionally done to make it so that people do not understand that their oath is something that is superior. And in order to swear an oath, you got to have principles. And if you don't have principles, then perhaps you shouldn't swear that oath. And the fact that law enforcement, which used to be called peace officers, and they were called peace officers for a reason, now they're called law enforcement for a reason. I think they don't grasp the concept of what it is that their job is and what it entails. They prefer to see themselves as law enforcement and not as the individuals who are supposed to keep the peace to make sure that everyone's rights are secured.
Yeah, it's after the what was it, Michael thing in Ferguson. Can't think of the guy's last name. Michael Brown. And I remember seeing what was it? What was the name of the organ? God, why am I drawing so many blanks tonight? If I'm creating notebooks of blank paper because I can't. Was it the Oath Keepers showed up armed with ARs? Protecting
right.
Some of the businesses, but the great thing is they were approaching people like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "You know what? If you want to protest peacefully, go for it. We will actually protect you. But if you start tearing stuff up, now we're taking a different avenue here." But after everything was done, and the federales investigated the police department, the one thing they found is a significant amount of certain people being stopped and a lot of fines and a lot of tickets and stuff being handed out. And one of the things, Tom, that really drives me insane is when now rightfully so, the police officers, now they're called law enforcement. Some people, I would say, in some areas would call them revenue generators, because that seems to be their purpose, is collecting as much of the taxpayer money as they can for the city to fund themselves and the courts and everything else. It's like people are getting mad at the police, but it's like you need to look past the police. Yes, the police are enforcing these increasingly crappier laws, but your city aldermen and your mayors and maybe your county executives are the ones passing some of these laws as well. And it really disappoints me that these people don't have the mentality to look past the police officers and look at the other elected officials in these areas that are coming up with all these statutes and regulations and different ways of penalizing the people. And that was something that you saw a little bit about it on the news, but it was kind of glossed over. It was, the police officer and Michael Brown and then the riots and the looting and the burning. But that little part of what was found in an investigation just they glossed over it, and they're like, yep, they write too many tickets, and they go on. It's like, man, I wish those people had a better understanding of what their city officials are doing to them in a meeting, sometimes, a not public meeting, coming up these different rules that people have to follow. And of course, when you're live in an urban neighborhood that maybe is a poor neighborhood and you can't afford to jump through all the fiery hoops, well, then you bear the brunt of the revenue generators when the city needs more money. And that just I just wish they could grasp that concept, that these laws are not created by the police. Yes, they are enforced, and they shouldn't be, but those laws are coming from somewhere else.
Well, you just actually gave a classic example of why it is that Amendment 6 that will be on the ballot should go down to defeat.
Yes.
Because it will create a mechanism, and it states in Amendment 6, now this is one that the legislative body decided it was important to put it on the ballot. But it says, in order to ensure that all Missourians have access to the courts of justice as guaranteed by this Constitution, the administration of justice shall include the levying of costs and fees to support salaries and benefits for sheriffs, former sheriffs, prosecuting attorneys, former prosecuting attorneys, circuit attorneys, and former circuit attorneys. Where do you think the cost of those fees and those levying of costs and fees get applied to?
Yeah, every ticket they write. And that's the thing. I was sitting in the gallery on the House side the last day of session because I was wanting to see if gold and silver legislation was even going to make the floor, and they brought this up. And there was I don't remember who it was. There was one rep whose concern was that this invites these sheriffs and police to write way more tickets in order to get this money to fund. I know some of it is the the benefits for the sheriffs, especially the pensions. They were up in arms that these pensions were running dry. So this is their so-called constitutional, turd on a piece of paper that they would like the people to pass. Tom, give me your thoughts on this amendment, because I know you said it should fail, and I hope it does fail. But a two-parter. Give me some more of your thoughts on this. And B, do you think it will pass? Because I have a scary feeling that because people are going to focus on either you'll have better access to courts of justice, but they're going to see funding the benefits and the pay of these sheriffs and all these other law enforcement positions. And too many people fall for this tugging at the heartstring thing, if you will, and just decide to go ahead. Well, you know what? We want to show our support for the police and then check a box and then wonder why down the road they're getting stopped every time they turn around.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, the old mantra is that we are a nation of laws. I don't know who created that mantra, but they should have a third eye in the middle of their forehead, because that is probably one of the worst things I have ever discovered in all of my research that people should have become addicted to. Nationally, there is a 94% success rate in the criminal justice system of convicting people. And if you ever want to decide to understand how mind numb a lot of people are in the jury box right now, there's this one podcast that I've been listening to, and I can't think of the name of it to save my life, but they follow the case. Now, this is after the case has already been adjudicated, but since you've probably never heard of it, you're not aware of anything that has occurred. But also at the end of the case, they interview some of the jurists in how it is that they came to their opinion. And I've literally heard some of the people on the jury say, well, we really don't think that this individual did it, but they're guilty of something. Therefore, we found them guilty of doing this. And people don't think they're going to get caught up, or they're not going to get swept up in that system. Just look at all the people for January the 6th. You literally have people sitting in prison right now because their crime is that they walked through the front door of a building that the police were holding the door open. They ventured around inside the building. They took selfies of themselves somewhere in the building, and now they're sitting in prison for all kinds of different charges that have been fabricated by the Department of Justice. And guess what? They will get levied fees and additional fines and court costs to pay for the adjudication of their guilty verdict, because they realistically don't have a defense. If you want to pay for all this stuff, then create a local sales tax for it. At least then you can kind of control how it's spent, where it goes, how it is that the system functions. I mean, from my understanding, what I have been told and what I have researched, the prosecutorial side gets a whole bunch of money. The defense side gets a whole little amount of money. So you basically have it so where the government has created a mechanism by which they are far superior in funding than the defense side is. And when they tell you that you have to be proven guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, do you really trust those 12 people who are judging you to actually understand what it is that they're supposed to do? I've literally had people tell me that, well, if they didn't want to be found guilty, they shouldn't have done the crime. Well, you're actually supposed to rule based on the fact is, did the state prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the individual that is on trial did the crime that they are trying to prosecute them for? And if they did not, then you can't find them guilty. We've lost a whole generation or two generations, probably even back to my generation, and I fall into the boomer category, where people don't understand what it is that their authority is while they're a jurist, and what it is that they're supposed to do as a jurist.
Yeah, I was getting to that. People don't understand the power that they have as far as jury nullification, where if you think that a law is unconstitutional, or if it's immoral, you have the ability to say not guilty. And maybe, of course, now the state may have the ability to try that case again, but you've stood on principle. And I do remember years ago, I was listening to a show called Free Talk Live, and they brought up a lot about how people were going to these courthouses and they were passing out literature on jury nullification. And they were either threatened with arrest or being arrested, or the literature was being confiscated. They were not allowing these people outside the courthouse to just simply pass out some general information on jury nullification. So when that's going on outside of a courthouse, whether it be county or federal or state, that means everybody that's enforcing that rule is breaking their oath. And they are not and that seems to imply that they don't maybe necessarily agree with the guilty and innocent until found guilty. It seems that they are rather implying guilty until proven innocent. I remember 2 years ago, someone had the enhanced stand your ground legislation, and then one of the gentlemen in the Missouri Freedom Initiative talked to Plocker, and Plocker's like, well, that's that puts a lot of undue burden on the prosecutors. They don't have the kind of resources. And the guy said, you think the state has less resources than the person that you're trying? That's a ridiculous statement right off the bat. We know the state has way more resources than almost everybody in the general public. And he basically told the guy that bill will never see the light of day. And so it seems that our government, in a lot of instances, is saying to you, it seems as if they are just growing in size and growing in influence and getting us to a point where it doesn't matter. If they find you guilty of something, you will go to jail, because they will own everything. They will have the resources to drain your bank account till you can't afford a decent defense attorney anymore. Now you're stuck with one of these state these state little defense people, and not to throw shade at those people, but clearly a lot of those folks they don't have the resources, like you were just talking about. The percentage of who's getting this money is clearly going to the prosecutorial side. And so these these poor people that work for the state who have to defend someone who can't afford an attorney, they don't have the resources. So it's hard to live in a free society when the state and its agencies and entities and establishments and institutions clearly have the advantage over the people who are supposed to be the government as well. And that doesn't bode well for us as Americans, or if it's whatever country this would happen to be happening in. It doesn't bode well for the people when the state just has the utmost authority and all the resources, and if they decide they want to crack down on you, by God, they will get you.
Yeah, they seem to forget that concept that the people are the controllers of government. Simply because you're elected does not give you the reign of supremacy that you believe that it gives you, because there is this document called the Constitution of the State of Missouri, which is the people's rules and regulations on how you, as an elected official, are to govern while you're sitting in office. But sadly, our education system, and this probably goes back even before Lincoln, and no, I'm not talking the education system, but the thought process that the people no longer control government. the government will control the people because, after all, and you've heard this quite often, we're a democracy. You can't destroy the democracy. Well, I'm sorry, the republic was not set up to make it so that the government ruled over the people unless the people granted them such authority. And if you look at most of the revised statutes of Missouri, a good chunk of them, there's nowhere within the confines of the state constitution where the people have granted them the authority to rule or to govern in the manner that they do.
Okay, and this is something that I keep getting stuck on and I keep talking about, Tom. We talk about the people, and I know you have made this statement before. I am starting to make this statement more and more, but I have to give credit to you because you kind of brought it to my attention that a lot of people don't understand, sovereignty of the self, and they're always out looking for a ruler. Even people who generally you tend to fight for liberty causes still at the end of the day seem to be looking for a ruler, or they want to say a leader, but it's a ruler because a lot of the leaders they're looking to get elected aren't acting constitutionally. So it seems that the people can't help themselves, and not all people, but a good majority of people are always looking for a ruler. And it's like, it's hard for me to digest the fact that you say you want to be free, but you're voting generally for one of the two, especially on the so-called freedom side, these Republicans that wouldn't know freedom if it hit them in the head with a frying pan. So it's self-defeating to act in this manner and to behave this way and think this way. It's really just, you're defeating your own cause by looking for these certain people who you think are will suit you best. But again, at the end of the day, if you look at their track record as a representative or a senator, it's like, well, you're not voting very constitutionally. So why should I look to you to, quote unquote, lead the state into more prosperous and more peaceful and more free times when you've shown that you can't really vote constitutionally as your time as a rep or senator. So again, it's one of those things. I get it. A lot of people don't take the time to have an understanding. Again, I am not a scholar. I'm not an expert, but I'm just coming to this understanding, watching other people around me, and it's a little creepy. And I want to be. I don't want to go, well, these people are all dumb and we should just dismiss them. And no, but I do have problems feeling sorry for them when they act in this manner, and then they go, this state's not getting any better. Well, some of us could have told you it's not going to get better. You choose not to listen. But yeah, after talking to you and having conversations with you and you making some of these statements, and I want you to elaborate your thoughts on this, but yeah, people are just constantly looking for a leader, and a lot of people seem to have given up almost completely on just being a sovereign individual.
Well, I'm kind of curious at what point that somebody came to the conclusion that within their lifetime that somehow they're now owned by the people in government. I know Hillary Clinton said it takes a village, but each village is made up of individuals. And simply because you've got 50% plus one doesn't make you to the point where you get to infringe upon somebody who's in the 49% category's rights. But that's the essence that we've come to. Anytime someone says, well, we need to elect better leaders, I said, well, have you looked in the mirror lately? What do you mean? I said, because you're the leader. You know, the guy who got me involved in this used to always tell me, go look in the mirror and say, I'm the reason it is this way. And I took him at his word. I used to go and look in the mirror. I am the reason. I didn't know what I was doing. And finally I asked him, I said, why am I doing that? He says, because you're the reason it is this way. You continue to vote in a manner that gives people the thought process that you will sacrifice your liberties and you'll sacrifice your freedoms for people who you think are going to go to a certain realm of government to secure those rights and liberties, and you don't know a darn thing about them. So now I know for positive fact I vote in the minority. Yeah, I go and vote every single time there's election. I know when I cast a vote, I'm always going to be in the minority because I am actually looking for the liberty and the freedom application 100%. I'm not looking for 30%. I'm not looking for 40%. I'm not looking for 50%. I may kind of twinge at 70% and say, well, that 70 is a whole lot better than 30. But if I can't get somebody who is in essence of 80% with the thought process of, hey, I'm going up there to secure your rights, and that's the only reason I'm going up there, then why should I send you up there? Because your thought process is, in reality, already your mindset is you're going up there to make friends, and you're also going up there in a manner that you don't understand why it is that you were elected in the first place.
No, yeah, that's absolutely right. A lot of times, I believe, unless someone's just a heck of a snake oil salesman, I believe that you can, if you talk to them for 10 minutes and you kind of know what's up as far as Constitution and the process and everything else, I think if you talk to a lot of these candidates 10, 15 minutes, you can figure out if they have any inkling of what their job entails. If they say what, some of the statements that you've heard, Tom, you go, okay, well, you clearly don't have an understanding. Now, if you're having a conversation and they bring up articles of the Constitution, then you're like, oh, someone's clearly read the document. It makes you feel a little better. Like maybe this person knows what the heck they're actually supposed to be doing. Now, I don't know that for sure. You can be proven wrong. Again, the shining example in Jefferson City right now is Mike Moon. And generally, for the most part, you can count on him to vote. Again, nobody's perfect. We're never going to get perfection. But he's about as close as you're going to come to a great or a perfect senator. Because Mike Moon is generally somebody you don't have to sit there and worry about, oh, God. If you're in his district, you don't wake up in the morning, if you're thinking about liberty all the time, and go, oh, God, what the heck's Mike Moon going to do today? You generally don't have to worry about that. A lot of the rest of them, especially the ones who love to tell you how they're a constitutional conservative or they're a constitutional Christian, and then you look at their voting record and you're like, hey, you're really not. And again, I hearken back to the last meet and greet that Gary Ride had for Holly Jones. And when it was all done, we're standing outside, and you made the statement that, these people aren't as constitutional as they say they are. And at first I was like, wow, that's kind of harsh. But then again, I took a step back and looked at everything. And I'm like, oh, yeah, clearly Tom was on to something again. All right. I want to get into one of these other amendments. I mean, we've got a few. But I want to focus more on, we got Amendment 6 out of the way. But I want to focus on the ones that are going to put something into the Constitution. So we've got amendment. Let's see. I thought there was more than one. I guess
let's do 7.
7. Okay. Yeah.
7 is the one that I fear that most people who will proclaim to be liberty and freedom are going to put this in the Constitution without a clue of what it is that Amendment 7 does. Now, Amendment 7 is the one that it's on the ballot as being, I think it says it will make the Constitution consistent with state law by only allowing citizens of the United States to vote. It prohibits the ranking of candidates by limiting voters to a single vote per candidate or issue, and requires the plurality winner of a political party primary to be the single candidate at the general election. Now, just in reading the official ballot title, I get the inclination it's trying to do three different things. And those three different things all fall under the heading of elections. It's removing the word all citizens of the United States and making it so only citizens of the United States, which is factually accurate. I would be okay with that. That's Section 2. In Section 3, they have all elections by the people shall be by paper ballot or by any mechanical method prescribed by law. Voters shall have only a single vote for each issue on which such voter is eligible to vote. Voters shall have the same number of votes for an office as the number of open seats to be elected to such office at that election. Under no circumstances shall a voter be permitted to cast a ballot in a manner that results in the ranking of candidates for a particular office. Notwithstanding any provision of this subsection to the contrary, this subsection shall not apply to any nonpartisan municipal election held in a city that had an ordinance in effect as of November 5th, 2024, that permits voters to cast more than a single vote for each issue or candidate on which such voter is eligible to vote. So that's removing the thought process of somebody writing a law allowing for ranked choice voting. I'm okay with that. Section 24 is where I have a huge issue. And it states the person receiving the greatest number of votes at a primary election. And I really hate that they call a primary an election, because in reality, it's a selection. It's not an election. Election is when you cast a vote for an individual who is going to occupy an office. They're going to be your representation. That's not what this is doing. A vote cast in a primary election is choosing the beauty contestant for a political party that will then go eventually to the general ballot, so you can vote for the Republican, the Democrat, the Libertarian, whatever. But it goes on to state that the name of such candidate shall be placed on the official ballot at the general election unless removed or replaced as provided by law. The person receiving the greatest number of votes at the general election shall be declared the winner. Well, that's a duh moment there. Notwithstanding any provision of this section to the contrary, this section shall not apply to any nonpartisan municipal election, yada, yada, yada. That makes perfect sense. The fact that Section 24 places the primary into the state constitution is enough reason for me to say no way, because a primary is nothing but both the Republicans and the Democrats receiving corporate welfare in the form of taxpayer-funded elections for the political parties to choose who it is that's going to go forth to the general election, and that should be done by the political party. It should not be done with taxpayer money. And that is Amendment 7.
And as soon as I started reading it, I knew exactly one of the reasons that you weren't going to like it, and it was the primary thing, because you've been on this show before to talk about your displeasure, how the central committees should do this and then the taxpayer shouldn't be footing the bill for political parties to have, as you call it, a beauty contest. And that's what it is. I mean, we should not be on the hook to pay for, if these political parties are supposed to be kind of separate entities, not directly tied to a government body. They're not. The Republican Central Committees aren't members of the House of Representatives or the state Senate. Why are we footing the bill for their beauty contest? And again, I had never thought of that until you brought it up. Well, in fact, I have to admit, I didn't know that we paid for the primaries. That's one of the things I was unaware of.
It would be like you and I demanding that we get to vote for or actually not even demanding. The fact of the matter would be that it would be like you and I being able to cast a vote for who's going to sit on the board of directors for Microsoft, even though we do not own stock in Microsoft. Now, I don't own any stock in the Republican Party. I don't participate in Republican Party events. I try to avoid people within the Republican Party. Some of them are my friends, but I avoid the organizational application of both political parties. But it absolutely infuriates me and it frustrates me that both political parties have no problem with sticking their hand into my wallet, extracting $7 or $8 out of it, and saying, well, you're going to pay for our primary because we have this thing called democracy, and you get to participate in the democratic process to determine who it is that goes forth to the general. No, I don't want that. Keep your hand out of my pocket. If whatever district that I live in, the people in the Central Committee of the Democrats and the Republicans, they can determine who it is that they are going to put on the ballot for the general election. Now, I'm not aware how much money savings getting rid of the primary would cost, but I would bet it's a pretty good chunk of change.
I think I've heard the figure before, but I can't remember what it was. It's too much. I mean, we have a lot of Republicans who say they want to cut the budget. Well, there you go. Cut that out. I mean, there's a myriad of things that we could cut out. But, again, getting people to come to the understanding, I don't think a lot of people understand, just like myself, I don't think a lot of people know they pay for these primaries.
It's corporate welfare. I thought the Republicans were opposed to corporate welfare.
And so supposedly Democrats are too. And they're both doing it. They're both doing it.
Both of them are doing it, and it appears that their disdain for corporate welfare is situational.
Yep. Just like during COVID, the Democrats love to talk smack about all these big corporations, but they were absolutely fine with allowing them to stay open while the small businesses got hammered. And the same party that loves to complain about these greedy corporations gave them carte blanche during COVID. Oh, well, you're very essential. You stay open. You, Joe Blow, with the restaurant down the street, you can only operate at 25% capacity, and it can only be carry-out orders. And heck, at the one time you couldn't have drinks. It was only the food, and then they would make these minor manipulations here in the state of Missouri, depending on what town or city you lived in. But yeah, they were absolutely fine with that. But now, see, now that we have a November election coming up, we must get rid of price gouging and do this unrealized capital gains taxation. I don't even get into that, but Yeah, it is. It is rather hypocritical of them, but that's how they operate. These government, both parties, operate heavily under hypocrisy. It's like hypocrisy generates its own revenue. It's like there's a hypocrisy tree out back, and every time they do something hypocritical, it generates a few $1,000s for their general fund. But all right, let's get into, because this is one of the hot issues that I know everybody and their brother's seen, is Amendment 3. And right away, why are we first of all, I know this is probably self-evident to some of the folks that are listening right now. And if they've heard, if they know Tom, they've talked to Tom, they've heard Tom on the show or anywhere else, he and I are both in heavy agreement on this. Why in the heck do we keep putting things in the Constitution? It's like we're having a contest to make the Constitution the size of the old yellow pages that you used to find. 10 pounds of book you're going to be carrying around if this idiocy keeps going. And so here we go. Now we're going to put, I love this. I love the feel-goodism in the title here of Section 36.1. This section shall be known as the Right to Reproductive Freedom Initiative. Now I've been hearing. So let's see. The government shall not deny or infringe upon a person's fundamental right to reproductive freedom, which is the right to make and carry out decisions about all matters relating to reproductive health care, including but not limited to prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, birth control, abortion care, miscarriage care, and respectable birthing conditions. There are some people saying this also, and I haven't read it in depth enough. This also will deal with supposedly transgender care as well. I don't know if you've heard that as well, Tom. But here, I think the most hypocritical thing is right in the beginning of the Constitution to preserve life, liberty, and of course in Missouri it reads in the gain of your own industries, but life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and the gains of one's industry, and then we'll tuck it all the way in the back of the Constitution. It says, "Oh yeah, if you want to kill your kid, if you want to kill a baby, that's fine," because preserving that life is different than the life apparently in the very beginning of the document. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, those whiskey drinking, pot smoking, colonial insurrectionists back in the day understood that what a right is. And the fact that subsection 2 under section 36 says, and you read it, the government shall not deny or infringe upon a person's fundamental right. Well, rights are self-evident. So if you're trying to proclaim this a right, that more or less makes it a privilege to reproductive freedom, which is the privilege to make and carry out decisions about all matters relating to reproductive health care. And this is where the people believe that it goes a little bit outside the boundaries of just childbirth, is when it says including but not limited to prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, birth control, abortion care, miscarriage, and respectful birthing conditions. Respectful birthing conditions would be, I guess, if I'm reading this correctly, would be should you choose not to go to a hospital for childbirth. If you decided to have a midwife, or you decided to have it in a hot tub, or if you decided to have the birth in a crypto chamber, whatever the case may be. Then it goes on to say the right to reproductive freedom shall not be denied, interfered with, delayed, or otherwise restricted unless the government demonstrates. Now, who's the government? The government would be those people that we elect. So you're telling them in one sentence that you cannot deny or infringe upon a person's fundamental privilege, not right, to reproductive freedom. Then in the second sentence, you're making the case that the right to reproductive freedom shall not be denied, interfered with, delayed, or otherwise restricted unless the government demonstrates that such action is justified by a compelling governmental interest achieved by the least restrictive means. You can't tell them hands off. Then in the next sentence go, well, it's only hands off if you decide not to go hands off. The contrary positions in this amendment are enough to make somebody who actually is a, do I dare use the term word Nazi or sentence Nazi, that you can at one point in time say you can't do anything to deny me the availability to do this. Then in the next sentence go, okay, I'm telling you, you can't deny me the availability of doing this, but unless I decide or you decide that you have a justified, compelling interest to do something about it. It's, at best, it's two-faced. And the fact that I think today, or was it yesterday, the judge opined that the ballot language that was written by Jay Ashcroft was misleading. All you got to do is read Section 2 and Section 3, and you can see the whole entire ballot amendment is misleading. So all Jay did was that he actually took the language out of the amendment, made it as part of the description of what the amendment does, and you've got a judge going, well, you can't do that. That'll mislead people. Well, all you got to do is read the amendment, and you can tell it misleads people. It goes on to state that any denial, interference, delay, or restriction of the right to reproductive freedom shall be presumed invalid. So even if the government demonstrates that such action is justified by a compelling governmental interest, you then go on to state in the very next sentence that any denial, interference, delay, or restriction of the right to reproductive freedom shall be presumed invalid. For purposes of this section, a governmental interest is compelling only if it is for the limited purpose and has the limited effect of improving or maintaining the health of a person seeking care, is consistent with widely accepted clinical standards of practice and evidence-based medicine, and does not infringe on that person's autonomous decision making. The fact that we're willing to put something like this into the Constitution, it's going to get tied up, and every single law that's passed is going to get tied up in the court system well beyond the time that I am sitting on the fireplace mantle. And I don't even need to read the rest of it. Anybody can. Now, I did actually read this verbatim on KSGF a couple Friday mornings ago. But when you get to the point, I mean, it's like the term in the Second Amendment where it says shall not be infringed. Well, basically what they're doing is in this amendment, they're saying the right to an abortion at any given point in time during the pregnancy and possibly thereafter shall not be infringed by any governmental dictates via state law.
Yeah, listen, I wish I could figure out who. I'd like to talk to the person that wrote this and go, how many times you're having a contest on how many times you can contradict yourself on a ballot initiative? About make your eyes cross reading this crap. But again, it doesn't really matter the topic to me. I'm just getting sick and tired of people. The legislative body maybe doesn't have the intestinal fortitude to pass something. And so they're like, well, let's put it to the people, and then we'll just put it in we'll just enshrine it in the Constitution. And then these same people who don't have the intestinal fortitude to work this out and, just make it a law or whatever, they'll put it on people will put it on a ballot. And, well, it's part of the Constitution. Now, okay. The same people who say it's too easy to amend the Constitution seem very happy to just allow all these things to be put on the ballot. And I don't know. It's constant contradictions. And, again, we're supposed to be the government. We're supposed to be keeping a very watchful eye on any person that we elect into this governmental bodies to make sure that they are ensuring the protection of these natural rights. And it's not being done. And this is the effect of not being vigilant people, of not being a part of the government. As we've been throwing back and forth here, we are the government. Now, I hate to ask this. I hate saying this because people just think I'm being some kind of jerk. But if the government that we now are under, if that is the people, if the government that we have now reflects on the people, that does not speak well of the people, does it, Tom? I mean, I know it sounds like I'm being a jerk and I'm just calling everybody stupid. That's not what I'm trying to say. But if the government reflects the people, then the people are not wise. The people are not educated. The people are fully a lot of the people, I shouldn't say the people in general, but a lot of the people are fully indoctrinated, fully entrenched in this system that we live under now. And even though they say they don't like the system, they continue to vote in the two-party system, and voting for people who say one thing and do something else because they're ignorant of the facts. And I don't want to sound pessimistic, but if we are the government, and this is the government institutions that we are ruled by right now, it doesn't say much for the people. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, one of the things, and I think this falls back to is, and it's not specific to this issue, but the statement I'm going to make is specific to this issue. Back in 1972, Roe v. Wade was a judicial opinion that was based on a state law in Texas that an individual sued on that state law. And after that opinion, we have spent the next 50 plus years with the mindset and the talking point, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. No, Roe v. Wade was never the law of the land. Roe v. Wade was a judicial opinion that dealt with a law in Texas. We spend entirely too much time with these opinions of justices that are absolutely in violation of the strict mechanism by which the state constitution and the U.S. Constitution, if it applies, was written. And then everyone we elect will then comply with whatever it is, and no one questions it. I mean, you didn't dare question the fact that Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. I hear attorneys today, even those on the right, make the case, well, it's the law of the land. The Supreme Court opined, and it's the law of the land. It's the law of the land. Well, if you go back to when Jefferson and Madison and Henry and all those colonial insurrectionists were alive, they would have told you that nothing is the law of the land. You can have the law of the state. And even after the United States Constitution was ratified, the federal government had limited capacity to do anything. Everything fell to the states. And there is that thought process that the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, were strictly for the federal government because it's part of the United States Constitution. It was not part of the state charters, which then became state constitutions. Therefore, that didn't apply. It only applied to the federal government. And we have spent, let's see, I'm 61 years old. So for as far back as I have researched in my life, we have spent this ungodly amount of time through the bar system making the case that if a judge opines it, therefore it is law, and it has to be abided by. And if the Supreme Court opines something and it's not in keeping, or it is in keeping with what it is that we believe the opinion should be or should not be, well, then that also becomes the law of the land. That's not the way the system functions. That's not the way the system was to work. But we've been educated to believe that if the black robes say it, then by God, it's factually accurate. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, when we're talking about education, and I keep thinking about, and I listened to the majority of it, and I got to go back and listen again. This Dylan Cooper character that was on with Tucker Carlson, and he came out and said, Churchill was one of the villains of World War II. And the uproar, the absolute uproar on Twitter, calling this guy, and of course, automatically everyone just likes to say that, he thinks Hitler's better than Churchill. Now, if you listen to the interview, he never said that. In fact, he clearly states, and of course he has to because people are dumb to say, I'm not saying Hitler's a good guy, but we're coming to a point where, we have, as Tom, you were just relaying here, these facts on court opinions. That's what they are. They're opinions. And people just look at that and say, well, you can't, especially our lawmakers, you can't question that. And now we're getting to a point where if you question history, you question one of the so-called heroes of World War II, you can't do that either. You can't. How dare you question Churchill's character or authority or whatever? Well, facts are facts, whether your feelings like it or not. And I am getting to the point in my life that I even have a deeper appreciation for people who question authority. And that doesn't matter if it comes to government, if it comes to the science, or if it comes to history. I enjoy everything. Now, I may not agree with them, but if someone's going to call, and if someone has taken the time to really research and they're coming up with a different conclusion, or they have a differing opinion from the majority, and they're willing to get out and say it. And I'm not talking about the stupid stuff. This country is built on slavery, and we still have slavery today, and there's white privilege everywhere. Not that kind of history. Not the modifiers of history who want to take little snippets of things and then turn it into the whole country is just a racist institution. But when people do this thing with Churchill, oh yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy it because A, I'm hearing some information that I probably have not heard before, and B, that I know there's a whole lot of idiots out there who are going to start throwing a temper tantrum, and then a lot of people have to come behind them and say, clearly you're saying this and you didn't listen to a damn thing Dylan Cooper or whoever that guest might have been said. You're forming an opinion based on your feelings, and you're getting out and you're throwing a temper tantrum. But it's just another facet where people just don't seem to have the ability to call into question whether it's Roe v. Wade or it's World War I or II or Vietnam or whatever, the war in Afghanistan, COVID science. You just can't have a dissenting opinion anymore, because the quote-unquote experts have stated this is the way it is, and you should just fall in line behind them. And it's infuriating. But, again, enjoyable when somebody comes right out and says, well, I have, here's all the facts. I'll lay them out. And then the retards come out from underneath their rocks and start throwing temper tantrums and stomping their hankies and wringing their hands. And I kind of enjoy that too. I kind of enjoy the other side, the uneducated side, seeing the meltdown. For whatever reason, I get some sick pleasure out of that. And I don't know why, Tom. Maybe I'm just getting... Someone's car alarm's going off. There it is. Anyway, it stopped. Anyway, go ahead, Tom. I'm just over here. I'm just on here, just venting my spleen a little bit, but it does get on my nerves, and it's also enjoyable. It's enjoyable to hear somebody with a dissenting opinion stating facts that allowing me and giving me the ability to say, oh, I got to look this up. I want to, or they state a book. I got to read this book. And then it's also enjoyable to watch the idiots having a meltdown and saying completely dumb things.
Well, that's why your guest last week was quite interesting, because he was discussing the land application of how Israel and Gaza and that came into being, and was discussing how it is that the Palestinians actually, or whatever it is that they're called, outnumbered the Israelis, but yet the Israelis ended up with a larger percentage of the land mass than did the larger population. Those are the types of things that people would dig their heels in. It's either one side or the other. There's very few people who, granted, now I may agree that the Israelis should have all that land, but let's not discount the other side of why it is that it's possible that Israel's constantly being attacked by the people on the other side of the fence, because they feel as they've been shorted. I mean, if the state of Missouri and the state of Illinois decided, one or the other decided that all of the Mississippi River, where it flows between the two states, belongs to either the state of Illinois or the state of Missouri, you can bet there's going to be a battle royale between those two states to figure out who actually owns the Mississippi River. But the essence was that they divided it in half, basically. So Illinois kind of has half of the river on their side. Missouri has half the river on this side. And that's not something, we don't research history or anything else far enough to look at the opposite side of the scale that we agree with. I see that in court opinions. I see it when people are arguing amendments on the Constitution. I mean, if you say anything bad about Amendment 3, you're probably deemed somebody who you're anti-choice. Well, I don't. When does life begin? Part of the problem is with Amendment 3 is in some states, you can have an abortion up to 9 months. But yet, if a woman who's pregnant is involved in an accident and she dies and the child dies, then the person is put up on 2 counts of manslaughter. Well, it either is a life of the child or it's not. So we've created statute within the confines of state law that give 2 different terms and 2 different meanings to the same entity that is inside the womb. In one case, it's a child. And in the other case, it's just a clump of cells that can be vacuumed out. You can't have it both ways. You either got to have one or the other. And if it's the other, then if you're involved in an auto accident and the woman is pregnant, then you can't count that pregnancy as a child if you're going to proclaim that abortion can occur up to 9 months. We have so created a dichotomy of laws that create two different meanings for the same entity. And we wonder why we sit there and we scratch our heads and go, wait a minute, how can that be? How can it be one thing at one point in time, and how can it be something at a different point in time?
Yep, I know when this has come up before, talking to people that might be pro-choice or whatever, and they talk about this stuff, and I've brought this up to other people. Like, listen, how is it that if a woman carrying a child would get shot or stabbed and she dies and the baby she's carrying dies, and that's 2 counts of murder, but if she goes to a clinic at 8 months and just has it scraped out, then that doesn't count. And you're right, it does create a dichotomy, and it creates this dual vision of life. And people, and that's the thing, when you're creating this type of legislation. Now, again, our legislation, I know there's pro-choice people out there, maybe some of them listen to this show. But to me, if especially if a state's saying, yeah, you can kill the baby at 9 months for all we care, that just shows that they don't care much about life in general, the life of the people. If they're absolutely okay with this type of thing going into the Constitution, again, completely just against the opening statements of the U.S. Constitution and most state constitutions: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And you're creating this duality in law. And it appears to me that the people that support this type of stuff don't really care about life, unless the state, again, if you can get a double murder on somebody, to put them in a cage longer. Now, I'm not saying they don't deserve to be in a cage. If you kill someone, if you take the life of someone, you deserve an appropriate punishment. But I'm just saying, the state will use its power to get you double time on a murder if that person's carrying a child in their womb. But if that person chooses to kill it themselves, well, that's different. And it's hard for me to have trust in government institutions when they act in this manner.
Well, one of the things that I find interesting about Amendment 3 is the fact that it basically tells the government that, no, you can't regulate it, but yes, you can regulate it. So what prevents the back alley doctor? That was one of the reasons why the Planned Parenthood came into existence, supposedly, was to prevent the back alley abortions where women were basically being killed because of what it is that they were attempting to do. Well, if you try to regulate that within the confines of Amendment 3, you can use the other section of Amendment 3 to go, no, you can't regulate that.
Yeah. I don't know, dude. I want to get into another one of these ballot initiatives. Come on, computer. Go back a page. I know you can. There, it's finally going to catch up with me. I want to go into... Now, this is not an amendment. This is a proposition. This is Proposition A. And this is establishing a $13.75 per hour minimum wage by 2025, which would increase by $1.25 per hour each year until 2026, when a minimum wage is $15 per hour, and also requiring... Now, this is the part I didn't know about, because when I had someone approach me last year, and they's like, hey, would you like to sign this initiative for this petition to increase minimum wage? And I said, no, thank you. I did not know about this last part. Also requiring employers to provide 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. And so I was unaware of that. Listen, I don't know how many times that I've had to talk about the minimum wage. I did look up the other day because isn't it the federal minimum wage still like a $7.25 or $7.50, something like that? And everybody's like, they should raise it up. Only 1.6% of workers in this country make the federal minimum wage. We have a lot of states that have increased the minimum wage, a lot of them to $15 an hour or so. So the people are all up in arms that the feds aren't, raising the minimum wage, but 1.6% of all workers make $7.50 an hour or $7.25. I don't know of anybody, unless they're a little kid doing some odd jobs on some farm or something, that's making $7.50 an hour. Everybody, around here, even like fast food joint stuff, the lowest I've heard is like $13 an hour. Some of them are $14, $15. But this whole thing of raising the minimum wage and then adding this paid sick time in, Tom, I just wish that these schmucks understood the economic ramifications that will be caused by raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And then watching them have a meltdown as a lot of these places either close their doors because they can't afford to do this or hire fewer workers. You just can't get them to understand that that's what happens. You also can't get them to understand that built into minimum wage laws, there's this understanding that if you don't have the education or the skills to warrant that pay, you're not going to get the job. So the people that get hurt the most, again, time after time, are the poor. The people who live in urban areas where the schooling is horrific. A lot of them don't go to school full time. They're skipping class. They don't read or do math at their grade level. And when they graduate, they can't read, they can't do math, they can't do a lot of things, they can't spell. They're not going to get the minimum wage job, because if you can't even fill out a job application, if you can't read the job application, if you can't give back correct change, you can't do anything, they're not going to give you the job. No, more than likely, you're not going to get the job. So all these laws do is make sure that the poorest of the poor can't get $15 an hour. What they will do is they will ensure that they stay on the government dole. Not to mention the fact that these people get put in a higher tax bracket, so they're paying more taxes, and then they're increasing the cost of everything around them. So at the end of the day, they're not really making any more money. And trying to get these schmucks to understand that is like me going to Tesla or to SpaceX and designing a new rocket, because I could do better than they could. It's infuriating. But again, trying to get people to understand the basics of economics, man, God bless America. That is really, really difficult. But I would bet this passes. I know how people are. Listen, I work in a union factory. I am a member of the UAW, and I know that just about every UAW member, how do I say this politely? The ones that just vote Democrat because Democrats supposedly support labor and its causes, they're all going to vote yes on this. All of them. They think they're helping people out, and they're not. They're just not.
Yeah, but being a union member, you will automatically get pay increases because the minimum wage is also increased.
Now, yeah, depending on where you work and what your wage is, yeah, you may get increases. I don't know that Go ahead.
That may be part of your contract.
Ours is not. That is not a part. No, it is not a part of it. Now, I'm sure some of them do include they will have to be above a certain part of the minimum wage. Our contract is not contingent on that. Now, there could be an agreement between the company and the union that I'm not aware of, but it is not in the contract that we make above a certain amount over minimum wage. That is not built into our contract. But yes, I see your point. That's probably written into some of them. I differ from a lot of my UAW brothers and sisters on this, and I would, if they're like, hey, you're going to vote? No, I'm not going to vote yes on that. And I will lay out every reason why. Are they going to agree with me even after I lay out all the sound reasoning that I have for voting no on this? No. They're going to think I'm some jerk. They're going to think I'm some jackass that doesn't care about the poor. No, I do care about the poor. So when you tell me that I should vote on the red side of the blue side of the ticket because they support labor, I can't justify that in my own head, as dumb as I am, that I know that the policies that this party will institute, along with the Republicans a lot of times, is going to end up sucking more out of my paycheck or costing me in the checkout line or whatever. When I buy a tank of gas, I'm going to get screwed. Again, I really have to work on getting a prototype of the wallet rape whistle. I mean, again, the thing's going to go off constantly, but I think it would be a fun novelty item. And people are like, what the hell is that noise? Like, oh, that's my wallet rape whistle. Every time some idiot comes up with a new plan in a state house or in a city or a county, and it's taking more of my money, my rape whistle goes off. And you notice it hasn't shut up the whole time we've been standing here talking. But I don't know. I wish people could get a better grasp of economics, but that's not taught in schools real well. So there you go.
Well, part of the issue is, and with Proposition A, what we're doing is rightfully amending Chapter 290 of the revised statutes of Missouri. But back in the pot-smoking, whiskey-drinking, colonial insurrectionist time frame, 90% of the people owned businesses, 10% of the people worked for them. I'm excluding the slavery application in this too. Now you've got 10% of the people who own businesses, and you've got 90% of the people who work for that 10%. And I always ask people, how much money, when I started my business, when I was sitting there thinking, I really get tired of being told what to do. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my own business. So when I decided to start my own business, how much money did you, John Smith, give me to start my business? Well, I didn't give you anything. Then please explain to me why it is that you believe that you should be able to use the ballot to tell me what it is that I have to pay people who are in my employ. You are violating my right of my industry of my own gains. You're violating my right to have a business. Well, if you can't pay $17 an hour, you shouldn't be in business. Okay, so now you're violating my rights to even own a business simply because I can't pay a wage or choose not to pay a wage based on the criteria it is that you set. And you didn't have a darn thing to do with my business. But yet here you are trying to tell me what it is that I can do with my business simply because it takes a village. We live in a democracy, quote unquote, and I can use the ballot box to force you by the actions of government to pay me a certain amount of money because I can't afford to live on $12 an hour or whatever the state minimum wage is. I can't afford my, the apartment rent, my car payment, and my 5 children. We understood when I was a teenager back in the 70s, we understood that when you went to work for like a McDonald's, you went to work for a Burger King, you went to work for wherever it is that you went to work for. I just happened to be a lifeguard at the community pool, making $3.65 an hour. It was not a job that was designed for me to have 5 children, an apartment payment, a house payment, a car payment, insurance payments. There was not even a structure where it is that I was doing a job that took a profession. All I had to do was know first aid, how to swim, and how to rescue people. It's not like I was building a rocket to go to the moon. Therefore, they paid me whatever it is that they felt my position was worth. And that's the same way with when you're a fry cook at McDonald's. There are some fry cooks who are really, really good at their job. And there are some fry cooks that absolutely suck. And to think that both of them are going to get $15 an hour simply because somebody went to the ballot box and demanded that occur by government action is absolutely infuriating.
Yeah, I keep making this statement over and over again. I have to admit, about every morning when I go to work, I make about a 1.5-minute, 2-minute TikTok video, and I just talk about some freedom topic. I've talked about minimum wage. I've talked about other things. But I've said this on the show plenty of times, too. I hate licensure. And I think licensure ties right in on this. You have to beg the government to operate a business within a certain boundary area. And it has to be in a commercially zoned, area of this town or county or whatever. But I've always stated, I think that when people go to apply for a business license, and after it is granted to them, they should look at these individuals and say, all right, well, I'm opening Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and I expect you to be there with your sleeves rolled up. And of course, you're going to get the look like, why? Like, well, clearly, if I have to ask permission from you, then you must be part owner or something. I can't do this all by myself, so you better have your hind end at such and such address on Main Street and help me out every day, because clearly, apparently, you own part of my business. And again, we saw this with COVID. I wish, we've had the food truck debate here in Owensville. People, and we had businesses like, I don't want these food trucks coming in. It's not fair. They may not have to have a certain license or whatever. I'm like, okay, you have 2 options here. You can gripe and moan that they're letting somebody else in to operate one Friday a month on a little cheaper basis, or you could do the smart thing, which is fight against all this licensure, all these extortion fees that you have to pay to your local government local, county, and state in some instances, in order to operate said business within a certain part of the town. You could fight against that, but instead you want to just keep competition out, which to me is lazy. That means you don't think you have to. You feel like you're entitled, and you don't want somebody else coming in here maybe who can price themselves a little lower than you or have better product and service than you. You'd rather just keep the competition out. And I find that to be incredibly dumb, but again, also lazy on their part. But yeah, government, someone either has investables. I'm thinking a festival and investor. Don't ask me how I got those 2 words to come together. But you can either do it on your own, or you get investors to invest capital and to start this business. Everything. You build a building, you buy all the equipment, you employ all the people, yet somebody on outside of that realm thinks they have the authority, the ultimate authority, to tell you, well, you're going to pay this much and you're going to do all these things. My buddy Sam sent me a file the other day, and I don't think I got the right thing that he sent me. Yeah. Red black monster. Okay, yeah. There was a bumper that used to run on LRN about, I don't see it on here, but anyway, this guy was like, he was going to he wanted to produce a shoe that could help you fly. And he goes in to, start the whole shebang with the paperwork. And this lady just starts laying out all of these things. All the agencies he had to go to and talk to and probably get permission from. Well, you got to talk to the FAA. You got to talk to OSHA. You got to talk to Workman's Comp. You got to talk to the Division of Unemployment. And they're just laying all these things out. So on top of you, again, having the capital to invest and create something, you have to go through 20 alphabet agencies and comply with all their stupidity before you even start thinking about making a product. And then on top of that, it's the pay isn't based on merit. It's based on some bureaucrat somewhere or a group of people saying that you have to pay X amount of dollars. And like you said, Tom, who the heck are you? With these people, and I've seen the same statement, Tom. Well, if you can't pay someone $17 an hour, you shouldn't own a business. I don't generally play the Powerball, but I would love to win a huge jackpot and just take a certain part of those proceeds and set them aside and get these people with this opinion and say, hey, is there some kind of business that you would like to start? Oh, yeah, I love. Okay, I'm going to give you the capital. I'm going to give you the money that you need to start this business. Buy all the things that you need to operate. All right. And then I want to come back in 6 months, just a surprise visit, and see what they're paying their employees, how things are going, and go, oh, how's it going? To see the disheveled look that they have when they figure out how much crap they got to deal with in operating a business inside the parameters the government has set for them, and think and go, do you think this is cool now? And just start grilling them like, oh, you're only paying, so the minimum, let's say the minimum wage is $15 an hour. What, you can't pay them $16 an hour? You shouldn't. I probably should take, I think I'm going to ask for my money back because you're not operating in a manner that seems moral and upstanding to people who can't afford to live on the wages that you're paying them. I would love to do that. I would love to be able to have the chance to do that one time.
Why not $100 an hour?
Right. It's all arbitrary. It's so arbitrary. And I've heard that from plenty of people who are against the minimum wage. Like, why not 25? Why not 50?
This statute absolutely violates certain sections of the state constitution. It's creating a mechanism by which it's talking about a minimum wage, but you made the comment about earned paid sick time. That's not a wage. That's a benefit.
Yep.
The two are completely opposite of one another. And the fact that we're amending Chapter 290 Revised Statute of Missouri and violating Article 3, Section 23 by having more than one subject pursuant to the piece of legislation that's being authored. I mean, they've got a huge amount of exemptions in here for babysitting services, for people who do things that are employed on or about a private residence for 6 hours or less. You've got individuals employed for less than 4 months in any year in a resident or day camp for children or youth. You've got educational exemptions, charitable exemptions, religious exemptions, nonprofit organization exemptions, where employer-employee relationships do not, in fact, exist, or where the services rendered to the organization are on a voluntary basis. Well, who determines that? Then it goes down here and defines what an employer is, what a family member is, a grandparent, and then it discusses about retaliatory personnel action. with the threat of discharge, suspension, demotion, reduction of hours, or any other adverse action. It discusses in here about it even goes on to define what sexual assault and stalking is. I mean, there's more than one subject in this 10-page piece of legislation. And sadly, there's only 0.1% of the people in the state of Missouri who would look at that, kind of like the one that's going to create put the primary in the Constitution. If you look at the manner in which it is that they're writing that up, yeah, you can loosely say that's about voting. However, there are 3 specific topics in that one, just like there are well over 2 specific topics on this one, which is supposed to be directly related to a minimum wage. Not about benefits, not about paid sick leave, not about all these different exemptions. I mean, I don't know who decided. I know this was a legislative thing because the people didn't want this. This is something that the legislators, or a prevalence of legislators, decided to put into the Constitution. I can't see. Oh, no, it actually had to get signatures. So apparently there was a group who decided that this needed to be done. They should actually read the state constitution before they're allowed to put propositions on the ballot.
Yeah, I'm wondering, so if this would pass, because the way our contract is, we get so many what they call PTO days, paid time off. So you call them sick days or whatever. You get so many after so many years, and then as you accrue more years, like every 5 years, you get another day added on to that. I'm wondering how this will affect, because we got a contract. I know our contract's up in March of 2026. So I'm just wondering if this passes, how that's going to change the contract, because like next year it'll be 10 years. So I'll have 4 weeks of vacation and 4 PTO days. Now, if you look at this and it's 1 hour, what is it? 1 hour for every 30 hours of work that you do. Yeah, 1 hour paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. So to get 8 hours, you're going to have to work.
But that's only if you have 15 or more employees.
Right. So where I work, if
you have 14 employees, you're not required to do the 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked.
Okay, it says the initiative would require businesses with 15 or fewer employees to provide at least 5 paid sick days per year, while those with more than 15 must offer at least 7 paid sick days annually. So, yeah, if you're 15 or fewer, you have to give them 5. If you're at 15 or over 15, you have to give them at least 7. Yeah, that's going to completely change the contract. That'll be interesting to see how that works out in negotiations if this goes through. What do you think, Tom? You think this proposition will pass? Because I'm saying it probably will.
I'm going to say that I think most of the amendments and this proposition is going to pass. And it's only because the vast majority of people who will be voting in the yes manner are either ignorant to what it is that government is supposed to do, or they just don't care. They have this little tyranny streak on them, and they have no qualms with controlling other people using the ballot box. If I'm an employer and I have 16 employees and this passes, I'm automatically firing 2 or 3 of them.
I bet you that happens too. I bet you that happens.
And I'm going to walk out in the parking lot, and I'm going to find out which ones have a Harris Waltz sticker on the back of their car, and those are the ones that will be gone.
Oh, good God, that's hilarious. No, yeah, I can see that happening. They're like, well, I don't want to give them 7. I guess I give the 14 5 days instead of the 7 days. So, adios. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that that's in there. They just hear the $15 an hour, and again, like you're saying, willfully ignorant or not, or they're looking at, again, a lot of stuff gets based on emotion. And it's just about themselves, and they're not thinking about the economic hit that business owners take, and that the public in general is going to take if policies like this are enacted or voted in. I don't know. I just I'm kind of speechless on some of this.
We definitely do not need the government to grant permission for legalized gambling in the state of Missouri either.
Right.
This thought process that government has to grant permission in order for the people to do something is mind-boggling, and that also goes back to an educational system who created the terms loophole. Well, they're doing something outside the confines of the law. No, they're actually participating in something that the government has not regulated yet. Applaud them for doing that. You don't need the government's permission to do 99% of the stuff it is that we do. But by God, somebody decided that government has to make it legal, and it probably comes from the Bar Association. Oh, we got to legislate this and legislate this and legislate this and legislate that. I mean, the people at Lake of the Ozarks don't want a casino floating around on the lake.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this whole, well, we're going to put, what is it, one on the Osage River, I believe, is what they are looking at. Let's see. Yeah, on the Osage River. Oh, operate on the portion of the Osage River from the Missouri River to the Bagnell Dam. Yeah. Okay, whatever. I don't know. I'm getting sick and freaking tired. I feel the old man energy coming up in me. I'm getting really sick and tired of these people thinking that that government has to just regulate and legislate everything. You know, it's just we got a little less than 5 minutes, so we'll have to wrap this up soon, Tom. But you know, it doesn't matter if it's marijuana, if it's gambling. Even people who generally seem to like freedom think that. Well, okay. Speaking of marijuana, Tom, I want to get we got about 4.5 minutes left. Give me your thoughts on this whole thing of Parson writing this executive order saying that any intoxicating hemp-derived things are going to be embargoed.
Well, flat out, he's so far in violation of his constitutional authority. It's not even funny. He does not have, and these executive orders and how it is that they're written and how it is that they're implemented is mind-boggling. The fact that Parson believes that he has the right to tell businesses, or basically to explain to businesses already in existence in the state of Missouri, that I'm going to put you out of business because I'm going to make it so that you can't sell any product derived from hemp, takes you back to the bump stock ban, where the Trump administration and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms decided to make 60,000 or 65,000 criminals if they did not turn their bump stocks in at a certain time frame. He doesn't own me. If I decide I'm going to participate or to purchase something that's hemp-related to benefit a sore muscle, I don't need to ask his permission to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I smoke a certain hemp flower to help me just wind down in the evening and sleep a little better. You know, I use that, and now that doesn't fall under the jurisdiction because I happen to come across of course, Scott Fawn and This Week in Missouri was talking about it because he was showing the labels of the airheads and how similar they look to the normal airheads. And I'm thinking, Scott Fawn, you're an airhead. And in this thing, they're like, it's always about the freaking kids. That sounds condescending coming from me, like I don't care about kids. Of course I do. I have two of my own. I have a granddaughter now. Of course I care about the kids. This comes down to people who were irresponsible. They had these things, left them in the reach of their kid, and their kid ate a bunch of them. So because we have a few irresponsible people and a whole bunch of other people that have nothing to do with this, hasn't happened to them, hasn't affected them personally, think they have to go and cry out to the government to say, we have to legislate the bad behavior away of these certain few parents. The left... How many times, I wonder how many times somebody leaves alcohol out and their kids take sippy sips of that. But we don't see anything about, we have to more tightly regulate alcohol. It's Parsons' good buddy who helped get Amendment 3 through is a dispensary owner, and he's trying to push all these people to the dispensaries. And he's going to drive people who want the Delta 8 or Delta 10 products that are hemp-derived to the black market. And that's all that's going to happen. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. And before I go, Tom, one more time, go ahead and plug your radio show, where they can find some of the clips and everything else before we sign off.
KSGF.com. Every Friday, except for the last Friday of the month, between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., is the Locke and Smith Foundation Hour. And usually I'm talking about government, predominantly state government, and how it is that you're being used and abused by those in Jefferson City.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, again, thanks so much for joining in with me this tonight. I really appreciate on such short notice you able to jump on and we can talk about these amendments and everything, liberty and freedom. But again, that's going to do it for this week's show, folks. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.